Hey there, welcome back to this week's episode of the C-Town Podcast, where Seattle business owners, entrepreneurs, and community leaders are invited on to share their stories with us. I'm your host, Christian Harris. This week's episode of the C-Town Podcast is brought to you by C-Town Real Estate. Their mission to make a difference extends beyond just their unique and unconventional approach with their clients and their agents. They partner with the community to give back a percentage of the proceeds from each home sale to a local nonprofit of their client's choice. Visit ctown.com, sea-town.com, and experience the difference with C-Town Real Estate today. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to next episode of the C-Town Podcast. We are doing something a little different today. We're going live. So hello to all of you out there. We are joined today by Phil Tavel, who is running for Seattle City Council District 1.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us today, Phil.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of dig into your backstory a little bit, kind of, what's going on in local politics.
Perfect.
How you...
Quite a lot.
Right. How you managed to get the West Seattle Business District, community behind you so well and whatnot. So maybe start with the obvious, why are you running for city council?
I mean, the simple reason for that is Seattle can do better. It can do, in my opinion, a lot better. I ran 4 years ago for city council, and that was an interesting race, and I finished third in that race, and I've just kept getting more active in my community since then, and I have literally not seen much get better in this city. When I think about it, a lot of the things that we talked about, or almost everything we talked about back in 2015, it's still there right now, and those problems have not gotten any better. So sure. It's time to get some change. It's time to bring a voice of moderation, a little bit of common sense, and that's why I'm here.
Okay. Now it seems like pretty early on in the race, where you've got a lot of community people behind you, a lot of businesses behind you. What do you kind of chalk that up to? Kind of the initial good following,
I mean, the biggest thing is the fact that they are dissatisfied with what they get. Specifically, the business community here in West Seattle and in South Park just don't feel supported. They don't feel like they're being listened to, when issues come up for, things like the business licensing fee or whatever things are happening in terms like Avalon right now with all the construction going on down there.
Right.
The city, this happened, and the businesses down there, I mean, the Shack and Avalon Glass and Luna Park Cafe, they've all been hit pretty hard by that. And, a call for assistance really didn't come from the council to them until after things had started. Yeah. And there had been a planning process for a long time. So it's really that. They want a voice that listens to them, that understands owning a business, because not a single person on council has ever owned a business before. Right. And, the holistic nature of that costs bump into each other, mm-hmm. and it's tough. And that if you own a business, you're not rich. Yeah. You have the equity of that business, which is fantastic. But, there are times, and I've experienced this myself as a business owner, where you pay payroll and you don't get paid. Yeah. And that can be tough. So they just want someone who can listen to them, who's open and who's accessible and available and in the community all the time, every day.
Sure. No, that's. I mean, it sounds like there's definitely room for that. Owning a business myself, with C-Town Real Estate, and being on the West Seattle Chamber board, like the head tax was a big deal. There's a lot of debate around that. So there definitely was complaints of kind of a disconnect between our yes. representatives and what was actually the community members and the business owners, wanted. And it was from, what I saw, it was definitely, ironically or whatever, politicized to right. basically be, you don't want the head tax. Why do you hate the homeless people? And why right. do you love Amazon getting $1 billion tax? They're, Amazon's one of the, 600 and some businesses, small right. businesses, in Seattle that would have been affected. So.
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, it was a plan that was going to hit 585 businesses, mm-hmm. and they, from what I hear from the task force that they empowered to take a look at the issue, they picked a number of $20 million a year gross or more, mm-hmm. and that there wasn't a whole lot of necessary reasoning behind where that number came from.
Sure.
And so to that extent, you end up having businesses like seafood and produce distributorships where we're working on a narrow margin. And so that head tax would have been passed on to all of us that go to restaurants. There's a rehab hospital in West Seattle that, talked to council about the fact that we don't operate on a, strong profit margin here. This head tax will put us from the black to the red. And grocery stores like Wajimaya, the number of people that they employ. And so you get this thing where making $20 million seems like a lot, but if you talk about gross as opposed to net, there's a real difference. And I think that's also one of the places where the council doesn't understand the business side enough. It's why don't we take a look at people where the net profits are higher? And if you wanted to pick companies that were having tremendous profit margins and look to them, but still, I don't see why you don't go to them and ask them first to participate in helping be a part of the fix, as opposed to saying you're going to be part of the fix and we're going to make it happen.
Right.
Yeah,
and there definitely seemed to be kind of a disconnect in the sense of, there wasn't a lot of conversation, around that.
Yeah.
And obviously, as a business owner, you understand that, like, on paper, the gross may be impressive, but what you're actually taking home, you may not even be in the black.
Yeah.
What's your experience with business?
I actually had a baseball card in a comic book shop long time ago.
Okay.
And then that was obviously pretty small, but it was my first foray into it.
Sure.
Out here, actually, I started a video game company down in Pioneer Square, and we at one point at our height we had about 30 employees. Mm-hmm. We were there for a couple of years, and that was a real eye-opener about all the different things that go into running a business and payroll and everything. And then when I lived in Australia, I actually had a games and collectibles store down there, which when I opened it was actually the largest one in all of Australia.
Okay.
We could seat over 300 people for the Pokemon Nationals and Yu-Gi-Oh! Nationals. Uh-huh. But again, just understanding what paying payroll means, what your profit margin on your products need to be, and just all of the expenses that go into day-to-day operation of a business and supporting other people.
Sure. Yeah, and how lean those businesses often are. I mean, it's not uncommon to hear about the owner of a business making less than most of their employees because you get paid less as the owner.
Exactly. I mean, you have the benefit of generating equity in your business, but that doesn't mean day to day and year to year you're seeing that. And I know a lot of people, especially in the restaurant industry and also like right now in Seattle, it's hard, and Seattle makes it really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I know a couple of people around here, when they've opened a second place to try to, increase that livability of it, they're going to Burien, they're going to White Center because, they find that there's a much friendlier environment to open their business.
Right. I know half a dozen business owners that have done that. I've talked to some businesses, on the east side, which is, where I grew up. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, when you guys come to Seattle? They're like, we're not going to Seattle. Right.
Exactly. Actually, there was a really funny story last year at the awards for the West Siders of the Year. The person that had won the award for the new business of the year, he actually thanked council very much for their work. Because of what they had done, he opened his second business in Burien, and it's gone much better.
Nice. A little tongue-in-cheek.
Just a little
jab. That's pretty funny. So, I mean, it sounds like you got a pretty extensive, background in a lot of different things, for business, to now, looking at kind of the public service, arena. What's kind of two questions. I mean, how long have you been here in West Seattle? And then I'll ask a follow-up question to that. Yeah.
Moved here 21 years ago.
Okay.
It was actually a friend of mine who I went to college and law school with had just moved here. He lived down next to La Rustica, right on the water. And I was living in New York City at the time, where my only access to sunlight from my apartment was like looking out one window and kind of up I could see blue.
Right.
And when I came and visited him here, it was just awesome. I just fell in love with everything about it. I mean, just beautiful, and the people and the places, the parks. And so I literally finished my last law school exam, loaded up a Ryder truck with two of my friends, dropped one off in Minneapolis, one off in Redmond, and I ended up living behind Sunfish down on Alki.
Okay, nice.
And in fact, since then, my grandmother moved out here and lived her last few years of life at Merrill Gardens here in the Admiral Junction, and loved it. And my parents live out here now and had my son here. And so, so this is is my home.
That's awesome. I mean, on top of that, it sounds like you've been pretty involved in the community and civic organizations for some time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. No. So I'm currently the vice president of the Morgan Community Association.
Okay.
I'm also on the board that runs the Morgan Junction Festival, which is this coming Saturday, actually, in the Morgan Junction Park from 10 to 2.
Okay.
Please come out.
And the date on that is going to be...
22nd.
June 22nd. Okay.
Saturday 22nd from 10 to 2. I am also on the board of directors of Allied Arts, which is actually Seattle's oldest civic organization. They were the ones responsible for really saving the Pike Place Market and Pioneer Square and the theaters downtown. I'm the vice president of the board there and really love that. It's an amazing group of people to work with. I'm also on the board of directors of the Seattle Green Spaces Coalition, which is here in West Seattle, an incredible group of people fighting for trees and open spaces and just some equity along those lines.
Yeah.
And then my trivia night that I have at Talarico's, I do a lot of fundraising for like West Seattle Helpline, West Side Baby, also for the YMCA's after school children's programs. So
you head up that trivia night?
I do. In fact, just recently I had it's scary, but my 500th trivia night there because I started it back in 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So I mean that's a lot of involvement. I mean, how do you have time to do all that? Plus, I mean, I assume you do a job that actually pays you money, and now you're running for city council.
Yes, yeah. Not enough money. I've been primarily over the last 15 years, I've been a public defender. And it's definitely true that public defenders are typically overworked and underpaid.
Sure.
For the last couple of years, I worked with a law firm that was situated up in Bellingham. I was kind of their Seattle office as their felony trial attorney. Okay. So the nice part about being a trial lawyer is it's not a 9-to-5 job. So you show up in court when you need to be in court. You can do a lot of work at night. A lot of work is over the phone and email. But I got to say, having a 7-year-old and having a family here and doing the civic things and running for office and having the day job, yes, it is definitely a grind.
Yeah, I'd imagine. So, I mean, maybe you can expand a little bit more on kind of your platform and and why you think and why a lot of people think there needs to be a sea change in the Seattle City Council.
Oh yeah, I mean, so first and foremost, I mean, we do just need change. I mean, the fact is, every 4 years, the whole point of the election is you take a look at what is the trajectory of the city, where is it going, and we're heading in the wrong direction. Yeah. So to that extent, we need something new. And, the 3 fundamental things that I want to change that aren't policies are, 1, just listening better to all of the people of Seattle. As I go around West Seattle and around the city in general, I find there are a lot of people that feel they are shut out from the process, that there is a strong vocal minority in this city that just shouts down other people. And so
you're only saying that because that's what happens in city council public meetings.
Yes, I'm saying that because that's what I watch happen at City Hall.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yes, when people go to give their time to talk about something, and they just get the chanting and the yelling, and the 1-minute clock or the 2-minute clock shuts off, and you're done. Yeah. So we got to do a better job listening to everybody, and that's also finding ways to go out into the community and listening to the people who don't normally get heard because they just don't feel like they'll ever be heard.
Sure.
The next thing is understanding, I think, our budget much better and where are our taxpayer dollars going, because I don't feel, and I know from talking to a lot of people, they feel the same way, that we pay a lot. I mean, we're generating tremendous tax revenue. I mean, a $5.9 billion budget in this city, but I don't feel like we know what are the deliverables. And clearly, since things continue to get worse, we're not spending it well. So you got to understand that. And then the last thing is really working collaboratively. Like we sort of talked with the head tax and things there, that that was a situation where the city just went out and said, we're going to do this, as opposed to talking to some of the biggest business in town and saying, look, we have a problem, we need money, how do we work together to find a win-win and solve the problems? Right. So those are the 3 fundamental things that I think need to change, because the homeless situation is one that's multifaceted, and if we don't do those things properly, we aren't going to fix it.
Sure. I mean, it's pretty clear that things aren't working, with things getting worse and us spending, millions of dollars, on a problem that's not getting better.
No.
How would you contrast kind of I don't even know if there is an actual strategy. It just seems like kind of throwing money at things. But how would you contrast kind of what the current policy and direction is versus what you think could if you get voted in, what you'd be advocating for.
Well, I think one of the things is, as I've learned over the last few months, is how much there is bureaucracy and politics that are getting in the way of things just being effectively done. And so to that extent, like there's something called the MDARS, the Multi-Departmental Administrative Rules, and they set out functioning for one of the things specifically is how the police interact with different people if you're in a tent encampment or if you're in an RV, or you on a sidewalk or you're on the road or you're in a park, and it lays out like which city department is associated with which area, and the police actually have to call and find out and get permission before they can do things. And so as I've seen and talked to a lot of people, I also sit on the Southwest Precinct Advisory Council for the police here. And, what I hear from them and the police that are on the ground is from week to week, they don't necessarily know what they're allowed to do. How far can they go? Sure. Can they ticket an RV and move it along? And so speeding that stuff up, just like moving that stuff out of the way so the police can do their job, enforce the laws of the city for everybody. Yeah. I mean, fairly and equitably with transparency and accountability, but enforce them. Right. So if you break the law, you have a consequence, because if we go down that path of saying that you can break the law without the consequence, we start ending up where we are now. Sure. And then the flip side is you've got to have the services in place that are doing an effective job of helping people, so that you're moving people from temporary housing to permanent housing. People who have substance abuse or mental health issues are actually getting the help they need, that there's vocational training, that there's a pathway to something better than what's happening right now. Sure. And so it's that balance between, you really can't just keep enabling it to happen. You need to have better answers, but at the same time, you've got to enforce the laws and the rules, because everybody's got to live by them. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've got a pretty clear idea of what some of the pain points are and what's not working. It's from my exposure and talking with police officers and stuff, a lot of friends, and going to some of these like chamber, downtown chamber events, and kind of hearing about the on the ground truth from some of the larger nonprofits in the area that are doing work with it. It sounds like one of the downfalls right now is that the city of Seattle is kind of looking at it as the homeless problem is a housing problem, and that's what they're focused on. So they're like, we just need to build housing, and they're ignoring partnering with these organizations that are getting some real good results with combination of helping people get clean, and then working on their resumes and getting them into housing, getting them into community, versus you have a house, good luck, and why isn't this working? Why aren't they staying in their housing? I don't understand. You know? Kind of oversimplified view of things. So it sounds like partnering with the community and nonprofits is really a key thing. I was talking with UGM, Union Gospel Missions, last executive director, Jeff. I don't recall who the current one is. But anyway, he kind of broke it down, on a side note. He's basically like, hey, this is a relationship problem. Yeah. He's like, there's way more of us, functioning people in society that can come alongside these people, these organizations, and help, if we're not just saying, all right, government, here's my taxpayer money, take care of the housing problem. Right.
Yeah, look, housing is part of it. Certainly, any of us who have, recently changed houses and are paying rent, realize there is an affordability crisis. Yeah. And, there's all sorts of things leading into that. And we do need to build more. And we need to find ways to keep the current affordable housing stock there without tearing it down. Because you don't build new things and make them cheaper. But that's why I'm saying it's this problem where you have to address housing, you have to address the opioid crisis and how that's played into the substance abuse issues, you have to address undiagnosed and untreated mental health illnesses, people where the problem is just a job, that's the thing that's keeping them from being able to stay in a house, and work with them on training through unions, through places like Fair Start. Yeah. So it's, like Union Gospel Mission, Mary's Place, DESC, there are people out there and there are groups that are doing an amazing job. Right. We just need to identify the most effective ones and get more money to them, and identify the ones that really aren't being effective and stop pouring money in those holes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Kind of speaking on the affordable housing, front, how do you think the MHA policy? Does that seem like it's pretty effective, or for our listeners who may not be aware of what that is?
So MHA is the mandatory housing affordability upzone, and it's part of HALA, the Housing Affordability and Livability Agenda. It was one of the ways of getting more affordable housing stock. And the idea is we upzone the urban villages so that people can build and build bigger. And that when you build, the developers will either have an option of putting in a certain percentage of units into that new building that are quote unquote affordable based on, median income and things like that, which leads to a whole nother issue of who's defining affordable.
Right.
And then if you don't do that, you pay an in lieu of fee into a pot that can be used for not-for-profit development of affordable housing. However, the two huge problems there are, number one, the fee, the in lieu of fee, is too low. That, most of the developers that I've talked to are going to pay the fee because there's just no point not to. Because there's also an annual review process for financial eligibility for the affordable housing that are in those units. So it's just easier to pay the fee.
Sure.
So that's fine, but let's increase the fee so we can get more out of it. But the second thing is the money that goes into that pot doesn't have to be spent where the development goes. So for example, let's say the Morgan Junction gets 2 new huge buildings, there's no affordable housing in it, so the pot, gets the fee that's paid, and the development that can go onto the south side of Seattle. And that didn't benefit the community that actually took the new development, so the new housing didn't go there. So those are the two things that need to be fixed. It needs to be a higher fee, and we need to find ways to at least have a sort of right of first refusal where that money stays in that neighborhood and can be used so that neighborhood itself gets the upzone and it gets the affordable housing.
Sure, that makes sense. It's a nuance of the MHA that I wasn't aware of, so that's a good point.
Yeah, cool.
Is there anything else you would like to tell our audience before we sign off here?
So let's see. Just to give a little background, because I do think one of the things that's important about politics is bringing people with new experiences into the fold. So, I was a high school physics teacher for a while. I, had a video game company. I was down in Australia. I had a store that I ran there. I've been a national curriculum manager for DeRai University and a public defender, trial lawyer for the last 15 years. And so I'm very capable at understanding very difficult issues, and I can take them, synthesize them, and hopefully work on good problem solving. I'm a good listener. And like I said, so much of what we need now is just a calm head in the room. Right. There's too much divisive politics in this town, and we need to work on moving past that. So we're just focused on effectively delivering services to the people of the city.
Yeah.
So my biggest thing is to say to people, when you're voting on August 6th after the ballots drop on July 17th, look at the three of us who are running and just think about the person that you want as part of the 9 people controlling a $6 billion budget of this city. Is that person going to listen? Are they capable of doing new things and looking at new answers? And I am, and I'm here. I am always available. You can call me. My cell phone is listed on my business cards, and you can see it on my website, and just get a hold of me. So we need that. We need someone who's here, who's listening, and who's got some new ideas to just bring a little bit of moderation back to this whole process.
Sure. No, I agree. It's the, for what it's worth, I endorse Phil Tavel.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. It makes sense. There's too much divisiveness. And I think your demeanor and experience will bring a lot to it, versus kind of the career politician, and
right.
You're not really sure, are they really vested in our community, or are they just, using lip service? So,
yeah, exactly.
There's a genuineness, I think, that you have that I appreciate. So
thank you. I appreciate that as well.
Well, Phil, I appreciate you joining us for another episode of the C-Town Podcast and our first Facebook Live. So thank you very much.
And thanks for listening for those out there.
All
cool.
Right. Thanks, Phil.
No problem.
That wraps up this week's episode. Make sure to check out our guest website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they are doing. If you have any questions, know someone who should be a guest on here, or has a great story worth sharing, email me at christianharris@ctown.com. That's sea-town.com. I would also love it if you would go to iTunes and give us a review and a nice 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on great guests and provide exceptional content, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rank well on iTunes so others can find and enjoy the show. You can also find out more about me, how my real estate brokerage is breaking the mold and making a difference in our Seattle communities, and other projects I'm working on by visiting ctown.com, sea-town.com. Thanks for listening. The music for our podcast is courtesy of The Fascination Movement. You can find their albums in the iTunes Store. You can also listen to more episodes and find all our show notes on our website at seatownpodcast.com. This has been a Seatown Media production.